I think the statistic is like 80% of Americans don't have $1,000 for an emergency expense, right? 80% of Americans, or 73. It's pretty high. We're here to help you with that. And if you like that, or that resonates with you, like and subscribe to this channel, because that's what we're all about. Hey guys, Jared, the HOA Crusader here, and today we're going to talk about one of the most important things for your HOA that so often goes overlooked. And what we're talking about are reserve studies. Now, a lot of people don't even know what a reserve study is, and this is really problematic. Many states are making legislation that requires HOAs to have a reserve study. And the reason for that is after incidents like Surfside Towers that collapsed down in Florida and other major insurance losses with regards to HOAs, insurance companies are now going to be requiring reserve studies, and a lot of legislators are trying to require reserve studies as well. And it's a good idea. I mean, every responsible HOA board should have a reserve study on their property. Every responsible management company should push that their associations get reserve studies done. I have discontinued working with clients because they did not want to fund a reserve study, right? One client specifically, they purchased the reserve study, or they paid for the reserve study analysis, and they got the report, and then they didn't want to base their budget on the report that was provided. And really what it boils down to a lot of times is associations trying to save cost, right? And it's one of those things, it's like penny wise, pound foolish, where you're robbing yourself, your future self, of funds that you're going to need to come up with at some point in the future. And the sooner you start saving for these large capital expenses, the better off you're going to be. Okay, so what is a reserve study? I kind of alluded to it. A reserve study is where you pay an independent firm, like an engineering company or an architecture company, or a company that specializes in reserve studies, and they come to your property and they walk the entire premises of the property. They Google Maps it. Sometimes they even come with a drone. They evaluate all of the structures that belong to the HOA, right? So every property is different. A lot of standalone HOAs, homeowners associations, are just gonna have like common roads and drainage and catch basins, swales, stuff like that. However, for condo complexes, there's a lot more common elements that the HOA is gonna be responsible for paying for. So these reserve studies are going to look at all of that. They're going to look at the siding. They're going to look at the roofs. They're going to look at the walkways, the decks, the internal hallways, the sheetrock, the paint. They're going to look at landscaping features. They're going to look at electrical. They're going to look at lighting. They're going to look at drainage, paving, all of the major structures that you find throughout the association that are going to need to be replaced at some point, right? Because every structure has an expected life expectancy, right? And a lot of times these places go up and people are just like, well, they're brand new. We don't have to worry about it for 20 years or whatever the case is. Many times you'd be surprised how quickly certain structures start failing. We have a complex that's about 14 years old, and already some of the decks are rotted out. Now, pressure treated lumber is supposed to last 25 years, but because of the way it was installed, with the composite decking right on top of the pressure treated lumber, without allowing the water to kind of go anywhere, and it would keep the wood wet for like a few days after it rained, these decks are already starting to rot out about 10 years before you'd expect them to start needing replacement, right? So a reserve study brings in an engineer or an architect, and they go through the entire property meticulously, and they look at every structure, and they say, okay, this is the expected life expectancy of each specific structure. And they do that for the roof, they do that for the siding, they do that for the decks, they do that for the walkways, they do that for the roadways, they do that for all of it. And they say, this was installed on this date, or based on the condition today, we expect you have this much life left in it, which means you're going to have to replace it in this year, right? So it's 2024 now. You look at the decks, you're like, you may have 5 years left in these decks before they all have to get replaced. So we're gonna look at 2029 as a deck replacement year. And then they say, okay, how much is it gonna cost to replace all those decks in 2029? Well, they'll go and they'll look at the current replacement cost for all those decks, right? They say based on square footage and lumber costs today and what contractors are bidding. And they'll have pricing per square foot or per linear foot or per ton, depending on what kind of material and what kind of job it is, right? Per square, if it's roofing or siding. And they're gonna calculate how much it would cost to replace all the decks today. And then they're gonna project that number over the next 5 years. So in 2029, it'll probably cost whatever it's gonna cost today plus 2.5% inflation, let's say. They'll try to assign a number to it, their best guess. We don't know for sure. But reserve studies in general are gonna be good estimates as what you're gonna pay. They're not gonna necessarily be super exact, but it's a really good starting point. It's gonna get you 90% of the way there. So they're gonna say in 2029, you're gonna need to have $120,000 to replace all these decks, right? And they're gonna do the same thing with the siding and the roof and the roadways and all the other structures that people expect the HOA to pay for. And they're gonna look at all the dates. So you're saving up for the roof that's due in 2029 and the siding that might be due in 2035 and the roof that might be due in 2040 and so on and so forth. And they're gonna project these costs out and they're gonna say to fund all of your expenses when they come due, you're gonna need to put away X amount of dollars per year into reserves so that you have enough money when those projects come due. And when that money's sitting in the bank or in some other investment vehicle, whether it's a CD or a bond or whatever the association wants to put their money in to hold it until then, they're also going to calculate the interest or how much that asset is going to appreciate over that period of time as well, right? So you have inflation that you're factoring for. You're also factoring for how much your money is earning in the bank or wherever it's sitting throughout that time frame. So they do all those calculations for you, and now you have a really good number to base your budget off of. And what that's gonna prevent is the dreaded special assessment and the loan, right? If you take on a special assessment, or if your association is taking on a special assessment, it means someone mismanaged the association's funds at some time in the past, right? I'm gonna say that again. If you are taking on, or your association is taking on a special assessment or a loan, it means that at some point in the past, someone did not do their job properly and they left you with too little money to cover your necessary expenses. It's a product of poor planning and sometimes just financial responsibility. Now, if you look at the world we live in today, I think the statistic is like 80% of Americans don't have $1,000 for an emergency expense, right? 80% of Americans, or 73, it's pretty high, I believe. I'm sure in the comments you'll correct me if I'm wrong. Go ahead, put it in there. What's the actual number? But I know it's high. It's a vast majority. Could not cover $1,000 emergency expense if it came up. That said, the average American is the person who's buying homes and condos in homeowners associations. And the average American are the people who are getting voted onto the board of directors of these homeowners associations. So these financial practices that they're applying in their personal lives, they're also applying on behalf of the association. Now, that becomes a problem because at some time down the road, an expense or an emergency or something is gonna come up and the association's not gonna have the money to pay for it. And then the people in that association are also not gonna have the money to pay for it because they're managing their personal finances very similar, right? So that's why the government is forced to step in and write legislation to mandate that these reserve studies be done. Because what's happening is that associations are not having the money to do their roof replacement. Water starts coming in through everybody's roof. Their insurance company gets 1 claim, 2 claims in a year, and then they're like, we're not gonna insure you anymore. Now the association can't afford insurance. They don't really have the money to fix the roof, so they either have to take out a loan if they can, and then the additional expense the unit owners can't really assume because they're already stretched thin personally as well. Or the insurance company, doesn't write it and the roofs don't get fixed and the association becomes self-insured and eventually these things keep happening, there's a lawsuit and a bankruptcy and everybody loses their place, right? Associations are corporations that can and do go bankrupt, right? And what people fail to realize is that these are investments, that they are allocating a huge component of their net worth is tied up in these investments where they live, right? Your home is one of your biggest investments, right? A large portion of your net worth is in your home. Now, when there's not enough money to pay for these structural elements and an association goes bankrupt and you lose your home anyways, that's devastating, right? When your home starts to depreciate in value because it's falling apart and nobody's put money away and nobody has the money to make the needed repairs to these structures, now that's your biggest investment that you're losing out on. And so it drives me nuts when I have associations that, and it's usually when we first take over, because once we've been there a little bit, we usually get better involvement. But so many homeowners or unit owners buy this condo, they buy this house, and they forget about it. And they don't go to the meetings, they don't want to look at the budget, and they don't want to be part of anything. They just want to be told, how much do I have to give you every month? And the problem with that is a huge portion of your net worth is tied up in this home, in this place, in this piece of real estate, and you have no clue what's going on with it. You have no clue whether it's being managed well, if money's being put away and allocated properly for the next few years. You don't know if there's issues. You don't know if there's water leaks in 5 other units that you just don't know about because it's not happening in your unit. And any day now, all the cards are going to come tumbling down and you're going to lose your property. I see this every day in and day out, with not just the associations that people come to us desperate for someone to help them fix this giant issue that they've been having, but also I see it, I hear from it, I hear about it from people in other management companies. I see the Reddit stories. I see all of this stuff. And one of the biggest pain points in an HOA is the dues. It's how much money am I having to pay to live here, right? And usually people are really happy when those dues are low, but it's fool's gold, right? When your dues are low, like we're talking lower than everybody else in town, that's a really big indicator that you do not have enough money in the reserve account for when bad things happen. And at some point in probably the near future, you're either gonna get a huge special assessment and not be able to afford to live in your home anymore, so you're gonna have to sell it and move somewhere else, or you have a really bad board and they're not gonna do anything about it, and then the whole place is gonna go bankrupt, okay? So we make this content, we make this channel to give you the information so that this stuff doesn't have to happen to you. It's a wake-up call, a reminder to say, hey, let me pay attention to what's going on in my HOA. Let me make sure they have a reserve study that's done and it's fully funded, right? Can I see that report? That's something that you should have access to. That's something that your homeowners association should have already done for the association you live in. And if they haven't done that, they're not fulfilling their duty of care to you as the owner, right? And that's an indication that if you really want to live there and you like where you live, you should get on the board and make changes and make sure things are done correctly, right? You can't trust other people to do this for you because the average person doesn't really know how to manage their own finances well. Therefore, they're probably not going to manage the association's finances well. And your property manager is probably an average person too, right? There's a higher likelihood that your property manager is going to have an idea of the correct things to do. But it's really important when you're interviewing a property manager, ask your manager, right? How much debt do they personally have? How much do they have in a savings account? How much money do they have saved up for the future? Do they have a retirement account, right? Because how they manage their own finances and how good they are with money is how good they're gonna be with your money. So when you're interviewing a property manager, it's important to look at what is the financial stability of that property management company? How do they live? What is their idea or concept or philosophy with regards to debt? Are they someone that has a lot of debt? How much in interest do they pay a year, right? And that is gonna be a good indicator of how they manage your association. I'm someone who hates debt. My cars are paid off, my motorcycle's paid off, my house is gonna be paid off within 10 years of my purchasing it, even though I took a 30-year loan, right? I try to live well below my means and buy everything cash. And if I take on debt, usually it's 0% interest to 3% interest, and I try to pay it off within 12 to 18 months. And that's usually if I'm making an investment into a business venture that I know is gonna pay me back in that short period of time. Why do I share that with you? I share my personal finances with you, not getting too deep into it, but I share that with you because you know how I manage the properties that our clients entrust to us. I was meeting with a property the other day. Their complex is worth probably $67 million worth of closed real estate. That's what they're entrusted to manage. And that's what they're hiring me and trusting me to manage for them. $67 million worth of real estate in one complex. Their net operating income is a couple $100,000 a year, right? That's how much money is coming in and out every year, or in and then to reserves every year. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money in real estate. That's a lot of money in the bank accounts. And you wanna make sure that your property manager is qualified to manage those funds. You wanna make sure that your board of directors is qualified to manage those funds. And if they're not managing their own personal funds well, how are you gonna trust them to manage the biggest investment that you have? Your home is your biggest investment. Pay close attention to it, manage it well. And if you're not someone who's naturally good with money, if you're not someone who's confident to say, yes, I trust myself to manage my own money, then by God, find yourself a really good property manager who's trustworthy and who's good with money, because your investment depends on it. That's all I got for today. Thanks for checking us out. If you like this or you like content like this, you live in an HOA, you're thinking about moving into an HOA, and you want someone to support you and teach you on the important things so that you can be successful, have a great HOA experience, and that your property can retain its value and appreciate in value over the long run, then like and subscribe to this channel, follow this content, leave a comment below. I probably upset a lot of people with some of the stuff I said here today, and that's okay. That's okay. But there's a reason why we're so successful in this space. There's a reason why people trust us with their properties that are worth, $1 million properties plus. And it's because we do things the right way. We look to the future, and it's not we're not short-sighted in how we look at the overall plan and structure, right? And the reserve study is one of the biggest indicators. Do you have a long-term outlook? Do you have longevity in your perspective of how you're managing your association? And if so, you're gonna get a reserve study. Anyways, now I'm rambling. That's it. Thanks. We'll catch you next time. Thanks again. This is Jared with HOA Crusades. We'll talk to you later.